You think you buried her truth in that coffin, Nathan? Hannah's voice cracked like glass across the silence. You didn't bury her lies. You buried me with them. The organ stopped mid-note. Mourners froze, their faces a blur of shock and discomfort. At the front, Nathan Elington turned slowly, his jaw tightening, not from anger, but from something that looked like recognition. If you've ever stood in a room where grief and guilt were fighting for air, if you've ever looked at someone and realized you're both haunted by the same past, you'll understand what's about to unfold. Because sometimes the truth doesn't die with the dead. Sometimes it rises from the ashes of secrets buried too long. And when it does, it demands to be heard, no matter how much it hurts. Stay with this one. Not because it's dramatic, but because someone watching this knows what it's like to be blamed for a lie they never told. Someone knows how it feels to walk back into a place that once called them unworthy and to stand tall anyway. Welcome back, everyone. I'm truly glad to have you here again. As we celebrate this Christmas season, I want to wish every one of you a very Merry Christmas and a peaceful, restful holiday. Thank you for staying with this channel, for your time, your kindness, and your continued support. If these stories bring you comfort, emotion, or something to reflect on, please feel free to share this channel with your friends and family who enjoy meaningful storytelling. Your support helps this community grow more than you may realize. Enjoy the holidays, stay safe, and thank you for being part of this journey. Stay subscribed, please. Now let's get into the story. The moment Hannah paused to step back into Holmby Hills for the first time in 4 years, she felt it, the weight of everything she'd once loved and lost. What she didn't know was that Celeste Ellington's death wasn't just closing a chapter. It was opening a truth that would change everything. The iron gates groaned open as Hannah's car rolled slowly down the familiar, tree-lined driveway. Holmby Hills looked the same, immaculate lawns, white marble fountains, and sunlight glinting off windows that seemed to judge whoever dared to approach. But to Hannah, everything felt different. Colder, quieter. 4 years ago, she had sped down this same path with tears in her eyes and a single suitcase in her back seat. Today, she came back in silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. The mansion rose ahead like a ghost from a memory, towering and beautiful in the way pain can sometimes be beautiful when it's distant. Every brick held a story she'd tried to forget. As she parked near the circular fountain, Hannah saw the line of cars, black Cadillacs and silver Range Rovers, symbols of money and power. She took a breath, stepped out, and felt the familiar Los Angeles sun sting her face. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not again. Inside, the house smelled of lilies and wealth. The living room had been transformed for the funeral gathering. Silver trays of pastries, soft murmurs of sympathy, and portraits of Celeste everywhere. Hannah's heels clicked softly on the marble floor as heads turned. The whispers began before she reached the main staircase. That's her. She actually came back. I heard she didn't even say goodbye the first time. Hannah pretended not to hear. Pretending was something she perfected here. Celeste Ellington, Nathan's younger sister, appeared near the fireplace, her blonde hair perfectly in place, her black dress sharp and deliberate. Celeste's smile was tight, polite, and full of judgment. Hannah, she said softly, as if the name itself were fragile. You look different. 4 years will do that to you, Hannah replied, her tone calm but edged. Celeste glanced around to be sure no one was listening. You shouldn't have come. Not after what happened. Hannah's lips curved faintly. I came to pay respects, not to ask permission. The sisters-in-law stood in the same silence that had once divided them. Hannah could see it in Celeste's eyes, confusion mixed with loyalty. Celeste had always adored her mother, and Celeste had made sure her children saw Hannah as an outsider who never belonged. The air between them was heavy with history neither wanted to reopen. Across the room, Hannah caught a glimpse of Nathan. He was standing near the piano, talking to a group of business partners, older now, but still carrying that same quiet intensity that once drew her in. His black suit fit perfectly. His expression did not. There was something distant in his eyes, like a man who'd lost more than he could admit. Their eyes met for a second. Just a second. But it was enough. Nathan looked away first. Hannah turned toward the portraits instead, her gaze landing on a large painting of Celeste smiling regally, pearls around her neck, power radiating from her even in oil and color. The woman had always looked more like a queen than a mother-in-law. And even now, gone and buried, she still ruled this room. The family lawyer, Mr. Abrams, cleared his throat as he approached Hannah. His gray suit was impeccable, his tone rehearsed. Mrs. Porter, sorry, Ms. Porter, he corrected quickly. Celeste's estate instructions request your presence tomorrow morning. She left specific items to be reviewed in your company. Hannah blinked, caught off guard. In my company. Yes, he said, lowering his voice. There's a personal note. You'll want to be here. Before she could ask what that meant, Selina cut in sharply. I'm sure there's some mistake. Mother barely spoke her name in years. Mr. Abrams adjusted his glasses. No mistake. The will is quite clear. Hannah could feel eyes on her again, dozens of them. Old friends of the family, society wives, people who believed every rumor Celeste had whispered about her. She nodded slowly. I'll be here. Then she turned and walked out, leaving murmurs trailing behind her like smoke. The hotel room that night was small but clean, tucked along Wilshire Boulevard. The city light spread below her window, flickering like a heartbeat she hadn't felt in years. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, kicked off her shoes, and stared at her reflection in the dark window. She looked composed on the outside, but inside, everything was cracking. She could still hear the sound of the gate closing behind her the night she left Holmby Hills. She'd walked out with nothing but a dignity, and even that had felt borrowed. Nathan hadn't chased her. Celeste hadn't stopped her. And somewhere in between, Hannah had learned how silence could be both a weapon and a wound. She leaned back, closing her eyes. The funeral, the mansion, Selina's voice, they all blurred into the hum of the city outside. She didn't know what she'd find tomorrow, but part of her already sensed that Celeste wasn't done speaking. Not yet. Outside, the city buzzed with indifferent life. Sirens, laughter, music from a distant rooftop. Hannah reached for her phone but didn't turn it on. She hadn't spoken to anyone about the funeral. Not her co-workers, not her friends. Some things couldn't be explained, only endured. She walked to the window, pressing her hand to the cool glass. Holmby Hills shimmered faintly in the distance, that world of wealth and cruelty still pulsing like an old scar. Her whisper was almost a prayer. Lord, give me the strength to stand in that house tomorrow and not lose myself again. If you've ever stood somewhere you once called home and felt like a stranger, you understand her silence. If you ever walked through a door that once held your joy and found only ghosts waiting for you, stay with this story, because someone watching right now knows exactly how Hannah feels. And maybe they need to know that coming back doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means reclaiming what was stolen. The night deepened. Hannah lay awake, her mind replaying the last time she'd seen Celeste alive. The faint sound of that woman's perfume still haunted her, sweet jasmine mixed with control. Tomorrow, she would walk through that house again. Tomorrow, the past would open its first door. And behind it waited a truth she was finally ready to face. 4 years earlier, the long mahogany dining table gleamed under the chandelier's golden light, set perfectly for 3, crystal glasses, fine china, and tension so sharp it could have been carved with the steak knives beside each plate. Hannah sat at one end, her napkin folded neatly in her lap, trying to ignore the familiar flutter in her chest. Celeste Elington sat at the head, elegant in pearls, her smile polished but cold. Nathan sat between them, the quiet referee of a war he refused to fight. Darling, Celeste said, cutting into her roast slowly, her tone sugar-dipped venom. I spoke with your husband's business associate today. Such a shame what people are saying about you. Hannah's fork froze halfway to her mouth. What people are saying? Celeste dabbed her lips with a napkin. That you've been spending a lot of time at a gallery with a certain photographer. She tilted her head, feigning concern. Married women should be more careful about appearances. Nathan's hand twitched, but he said nothing. Hannah's voice trembled. Are you seriously? Celeste interrupted smoothly, sliding a manila envelope across the table. I don't deal in gossip, dear. I deal in facts. Inside were photographs, grainy, manipulated shots of Hannah laughing with a male co-worker, cropped just close enough to twist innocence into scandal. Hannah's heart slammed in her chest. These are fake. You know that. Celeste gave a gentle, pitying sigh. Do I? The Ellington name can't afford another complication. She looked at Nathan. Sweetheart, I warned you. Some women love a good last name more than they love a good man. The silence was unbearable. Hannah looked at her husband, her anchor, and waited for him to say something. Anything. He didn't. Nathan's jaw clenched. His eyes darted to the photos, then to his mother. He swallowed hard, but no words came out. The weight of that silence was louder than any accusation. Hannah's throat burned. You believe her? Nathan looked down at his plate. I don't know what to believe right now. That was all it took. Hannah pushed back her chair, the sound echoing like a slap across the marble floor. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Then believe this, she whispered. I'm done fighting for space in my own marriage. Celeste smiled faintly, victorious. Some women just aren't built for this family. Hannah grabbed her keys and walked out, the heavy front door slamming behind her like the final punctuation mark on a sentence that had been ending for months. The Los Angeles night air hit her hard as she drove aimlessly through the glowing streets, past quiet mansions and neon signs, until she pulled into the parking lot of a Ralph's grocery store on Sunset Boulevard. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel. Around her, the world kept moving, couples arguing in the distance, cats clattering, the city alive in its indifference. Taze came only when she turned off the ignition. Hours passed. She didn't go inside. She just sat there, staring at a reflection in the rearview mirror, the woman who had traded herself for someone else's comfort. By sunrise, the truth was clear. Her marriage hadn't ended that night. It had been dying quietly for years. This was just a moment it stopped pretending to live. Her whisper was almost lost in the hum of the city. When silence becomes louder than love, it's time to go. And when the first light of morning touched the glass, Hannah Porter drove away from Holmby Hills, leaving behind not just a house, but the version of herself who ever begged to belong there. Morning light poured across Holmby Hills like a spotlight no one had asked for. The Ellington mansion stood still, unchanged, untouched, almost smug in its perfection. Hannah parked at the edge of the circular drive, shut off the engine, and sat in silence for a long moment. 4 years hadn't erased the sound of the front doors opening, the echo of polished heels against marble floors, the scent of jasmine and wealth. Everything about this place still whispered Celeste's name. Inside, the air was too still, too cold. The housekeeper guided Hannah to the sitting room where boxes and velvet cases covered the table, rings, pearls, and the kind of heirlooms that had once made Celeste untouchable. Mr. Abrams, the family lawyer, stood beside them, flipping through paperwork. He looked up as Hannah entered. Ms. Porter, thank you for coming, he said, adjusting his glasses. Mrs. Elington left detailed instructions about certain personal effects. Hannah nodded. Let's get it over with. Abrams unlocked a mahogany jewelry chest and lifted the lid. Rows of glittering necklaces caught the morning light. But near the corner, separate from everything else, sat a small cream-colored envelope sealed with gold wax. Her name was written across the front in Celeste's familiar, elegant script. For Hannah. Hannah's breath caught. Her hand hovered above it, reluctant to touch. Mr. Abrams cleared his throat softly. She requested you receive that personally. The contents are private. Private. That word burned. Nothing in this house had ever been private, especially not her pain. She took the envelope with careful fingers and slipped it into her purse. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Before she could say anything, a voice filled the doorway. Didn't think you'd actually show up. Nathan. He leaned against the frame, black suit replaced by something more casual, gray slacks, a white shirt rolled at the sleeves. He looked different, older, but his eyes, those same deep, unreadable eyes, hadn't changed. Hannah straightened. The lawyer said Celeste requested it. Nathan stepped closer, hesitation flickering in his face. Thank you for coming. It means something. She met his gaze, unflinching. I didn't come for you, Nathan. The words landed like glass between them. Quiet, sharp, impossible to ignore. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the ticking of the ornate grandfather clock filled the silence. Nathan's expression shifted, a faint ache behind his restraint. I guess that's fair, he said finally. Hannah nodded once, turned, and walked toward the door. As she passed the grand hallway, a faint scent followed her. Celeste's perfume. Jasmine and control. The same fragrance that used to linger after every argument, every insult disguised as advice. It hung in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. Outside, sunlight cut through the tall windows, making the house look almost holy. But to Hannah, it felt like standing in a cathedral built from secrets. She didn't breathe again until she reached her car. Sitting behind the wheel, she pulled the envelope from her purse. Her thumb brushed the gold seal, but her hand refused to break it. Not yet. Not here. The mansion still loomed in her rearview mirror, watching. She started the engine, her pulse unsteady. Whatever waited inside that envelope, it wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't peace. It was the past, calling her name again. Downtown Los Angeles pulsed just beyond the cafe window. Horns, voices, life moving forward while Hannah sat completely still. The small envelope lay on the table between her hands, pale against the dark wood, its wax seal glinting faintly in the afternoon light. For hours, she carried it in her purse like a live wire, too afraid to touch, too heavy to forget. But the noise of the city outside only made the silence inside louder. Finally, she broke the seal. The paper inside was thick, expensive, scented faintly with jasmine. Celeste's handwriting curled neatly across the page, every loop deliberate, every stroke full of control even from beyond the grave. Hannah, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and perhaps that's the only way you'd ever listen to me again. Hannah's jaw tightened. Her fingers trembled as she read on. You were never the woman I wanted for my son. I believed you would take him from me, the way women like you always take from men like Nathan, ambition disguised as love. The words cut like they always had, elegant cruelty wrapped in reason. When I saw him losing himself in you, I panicked. I told myself I was protecting him, our name, our legacy. I made sure the court had what it needed to end it quickly. I fabricated what I had to. It was never about truth, only control. The cafe noise blurred into static. Hannah blinked hard, the words swimming on the page. Fabricated. Control. Everything she'd been accused of, everything that destroyed her, had been a lie, one Celeste built by hand. Her throat tightened as she kept reading. There is one thing I never told you. I knew about the child. I knew before you ever did. I had my suspicions confirmed, and I used that knowledge to ensure you'd never tell Nathan. I believed keeping that child from this family was mercy. But I see now, it was theft. Hannah's hand flew to her chest. The walls around her seemed to close in. Pregnant. She'd whisper that word to no one. Not even Nathan. Not after the hospital visit. Not after the quiet loss that followed. She knew. Hannah whispered. Her voice cracked, shaking the paper in her hands. She knew everything. She sank back in her chair, the letter trembling. The woman who had called her unfit, unworthy, unwanted, had stolen her truth before it was ever spoken. Outside, life went on. Inside, Hannah's world tilted back toward the night she'd left Holmby Hills. The accusations, the silence, the heartbreak. It all made sense now. Celeste hadn't been trying to protect her son. She'd been trying to own him. Hannah folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest, eyes glistening. For the first time, the weight she'd carried for 4 years began to shift, from shame to fury, from heartbreak to clarity. You ever find out too late that you were wrong about someone? That you let your pride speak louder than your heart? If that truth hits close, don't scroll past. Just stay. Because stories like this remind us what silence can cost, and how long it can take for truth to finally speak. Hannah exhaled slowly, folding the letter once more. The jasmine scent still lingered, mocking and familiar. But beneath it, something else stirred, a quiet strength rising from the ashes of her pain. She wasn't the same woman Celeste had tried to destroy. And this time, the silence wouldn't win. The knock came just after sunset. 3 steady taps, measured, familiar, and impossible to ignore. Hannah froze. Her apartment lights were low, the city's glow spilling faintly through the blinds. The letter from Celeste still sat open on her kitchen table, its words echoing in her mind like confession she hadn't asked for. She opened the door, and there he was, Nathan. For a moment, neither spoke. He looked worn, older, like the years had carved something heavy into his face. In his hand, he held an envelope, creased, opened, and trembling. "I found mine," he said quietly. Hannah stepped back just enough for him to enter, but the air between them was brittle. Nathan walked to the table, eyes flicking to the letter in front of her. "So," Hannah said softly, "she confessed to you too?" He nodded, voice rough. "Everything. The lies, the forged photos, the baby." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know. Hannah. God, I didn't know." Hannah's pulse thudded painfully in her chest. "You didn't want to know," she said. "You had every chance to see what she was doing." Nathan turned toward her, eyes glassy. "She was my mother." "She was your mirror," Hannah snapped. "You looked into her eyes and saw comfort, not cruelty. You let her decide who I was." He flinched. "I trusted her." "And you betrayed me," Hannah said quietly. "You stood there in that courtroom, listening to her say I was unfaithful, that I was using you, and you said nothing." Nathan's voice cracked. "I was trying to keep the peace." "Peace." Her voice rose, then broke. "Peace doesn't come from silence, Nathan. It comes from the truth. And you gave her yours instead of me." He looked at her then, really looked at her, the way he used to, before everything turned poisonous. For a second, the walls between them flickered, but the hurt was too old, too deep. "I should have fought for you," he said finally, the words trembling in his throat. Hannah's reply came like a whisper through tears. "You should have believed me." For a long time, neither moved. The air felt thick with everything they'd never said. Outside, a siren wailed faintly down Wilshire Boulevard, fading into the night. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "She ruined both of us," he murmured. "And I let her." Hannah looked down at the letter between them. Two lives torn apart by the same woman's fear. "No," she said quietly. "She started it. We finished it by staying silent." Nathan's eyes met hers. There was nothing left to defend, no anger left to throw. Just grief, naked and honest. He took a small step forward, but Hannah shook her head gently. "Don't," she whispered. "Not tonight." He nodded once, his jaw tight, his gaze soft. "Then maybe another time," he said. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt both emptier and lighter. Hannah leaned against the frame, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. They weren't healed. They weren't whole. But for the first time, the truth was finally between them, raw, fragile, and real. The morning sun hung low over Holmby Hills, soft light spilling through the arched windows of a study where the will was being read. Hannah sat near the end of the long table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, Nathan leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Selina looked like she'd been carved from ice. Mr. Abrams, the family lawyer, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. Mrs. Celeste Elington's final testament will now be read." The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to hesitate. As the lawyer's voice began, phrases drifted in and out of Hannah's focus. Charitable trust, family foundation, estate holdings. It was a kind of language Celeste had always loved, formal, cold, precise. Hannah sat still, heartbeat steady, pretending she didn't feel the eyes on her from across the room. Then came the line that sliced the air clean open. "To my daughter-in-law, Hannah Porter." The pen in Selina's hand clattered against the table. Mr. Abrams continued, unshaken. "I leave full ownership and property rights to the Holmby Hills estate, including its grounds, furnishings, and attached assets." The words hung there. Impossible. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Nathan's brows furrowed in disbelief. Selina shot to her feet. "That's a mistake," she said sharply. "It has to be. My mother would never." Mr. Abrams looked up calmly. "It's written in her hand, dated, signed, and witnessed." Selina's voice broke. She despised her. She told everyone Hannah ruined this family. Hannah didn't move. She sat perfectly still, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Nathan glanced at her, confusion and shock tangled in his eyes. "Did you know about this?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I didn't even know I was in the will." Selina's chair screeched as she pushed it back violently. I won't sit here and listen to this insanity." She stormed out, her heels clacking against the marble like small, angry gunshots. Silence settled again, heavier than before. Mr. Abrams looked down at the page. Mrs. Elington wrote, "I hope this home brings Hannah the peace I denied her. She should have what was once Hayes." Hannah's breath caught. She didn't know if she wanted to laugh or cry. Peace? From Celeste? The same woman who'd weaponized silence and secrets? Hannah's voice came out low, almost to herself. "She tried to own everything," she whispered, "even her apology." Nathan's gaze softened, the first flick of understanding crossing his face. But Hannah didn't meet his eyes. She couldn't, because in that moment, it wasn't victory she felt. It was a strange, heavy ache of a door closing for good. Mr. Abrams gathered his papers. Mrs. Ellington's final note reads, "May the home she once fled become the place she finally rests." Hannah looked toward the window where sunlight touched the far wall of the mansion. Holmby Hills, her prison, her battleground, her inheritance. And for the first time, she realized Celeste hadn't left her a gift. She'd left her a reckoning. The rain began softly, the kind that didn't chase you away but made you stand still and listen. The sky over Los Angeles hung low and gray as Hannah walked through the cemetery, the sound of her heels muted by wet grass. Celeste Ellington's grave was fresh, the soil still dark and unsettled. A bouquet of white lilies, expensive and impersonal, rested against the headstone. The marble gleamed under the rain, her name etched perfectly, of course. Even in death, Celeste had managed to make her presence immaculate. Hannah stood a few feet away, umbrella forgotten at her side. Drops gathered on her black coat, slid down her hands, mixed with the tears she refused to shed. She thought she'd come for closure. But standing there, she realized closure was a myth people told themselves when the truth still burned too deep. She whispered, "You always had to have the last word, didn't you?" The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. Hannah almost laughed. It figured that even the rain couldn't wash her mother-in-law away completely. A sound behind her made her turn. Nathan approached slowly, a dark umbrella over his head, his expression quiet and unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain did the talking, steady and relentless. He stopped beside her, close enough for their shoulders to nearly touch. "She made sure to control the ending," Hannah said finally. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Even in her will, she managed to turn guilt into generosity. Nathan's jaw tightened. "I think that was her way of trying to make peace." "Peace?" Hannah's laugh was soft, bitter. "She doesn't get to write peace into a story she ruined." The wind tugged at her hair. She turned toward him, rain tracing down her face like glass. "You let your mother speak for you," she said, "and I let my fear speak for me. And now look where that silence got us, standing over a grave, still chained to the past." Nathan lowered his gaze. For a moment, he didn't look like the man who once carried his mother's arrogance in his shoulders. He just looked human, tired, remorseful, real. He took a breath. "Then let's stop letting her speak." The rain fell harder, drumming against the earth, against their silence. Neither moved. They didn't need to. There were no more apologies to give, no explanations left to chase. After a while, Hannah closed her umbrella completely and let the rain wash over her. It didn't feel cold anymore, just clean. Nathan watched her quietly. Then, without another word, he placed his umbrella down beside the lilies and stepped back. They stood like that for a while. Two people who had finally stopped pretending, finally stopped bleeding for someone else's mistakes. When they turned to leave, they walked in opposite directions. No promises, no glances back, just a quiet relief of truth at last. For the first time in 4 years, the storm felt like it was finally ending. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that came after everything had been said, after the storm had spent itself and only still air remained. Days had passed since the rain at the cemetery, and Hannah returned to Holmby Hills for the last time. The estate loomed the same as always, grand, perfect, suffocating, but it no longer had power over her. Her footsteps echoed softly through the marble halls. Portraits lined the walls, each one a reminder of how Celeste curated not just her image but everyone else's. Hannah paused at the base of the staircase, her gaze tracing the framed wedding photograph that had once hung there, a younger Hannah, smiling too wide beside Nathan, a smile that didn't know it was being borrowed. Now that smile belonged to the past. She made her way toward Celeste's old study, a place she'd avoided for years. Dust lay faintly across the desk. The scent of jasmine lingered even now, faint but stubborn, like the woman herself. Hannah opened a few drawers, legal papers, monogram stationery, ledgers. Then she saw it, a small velvet box tucked in the corner beneath a stack of old letters. Her chest tightened. She lifted the box gently and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was from her wedding day, the moment just before the kiss. Nathan's hands were on her shoulders, his eyes locked on hers. Behind them, Celeste's expression had been unreadable, half pride, half warning. But now, beneath the photo's glass, a faint script marked back in Celeste's graceful handwriting. I was wrong. She loved you. Celeste. The words blurred as tears welled in Hannah's eyes. She sat down slowly on the floor beside the desk, her body folding into quiet stillness. She didn't cry out. She didn't rage. She simply let the tears fall, tears that weren't for forgiveness or grief, but for release. Celeste had never said those words aloud. She had waited until it no longer mattered, until there was no one left to hear the apology but the woman who least needed it. And yet, somehow, it was enough. Hannah looked up toward the tall window where the city stretched beneath her, the skyline of Los Angeles glowing in the late afternoon sun. For the first time, Holmby Hills didn't feel haunted. The walls didn't whisper. The air didn't ache. It was just a house she no longer feared. Before this story fades out, ask yourself, who would you forgive if they were gone tomorrow? Because sometimes forgiveness isn't about setting them free. It's about setting yourself free. And sometimes hitting follow isn't about a channel. It's about not missing the next truth that might heal you. Hannah rose, slipping the photograph back into its box. She carried it to the window, letting sunlight touch the glass one last time. Then she placed it gently on the desk and whispered, almost to herself. 4 years after the divorce, she didn't come back for closure. She came back for the truth. And when the truth finally spoke, it didn't destroy her. It set her free. If you really like this story, it's a must you subscribe. Are you done? If yes, thank you, and God bless you, medium dark skin tone person with folded hands. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.